Welcome to Faith and Science. I'm Dr. John Ashton. I have quite a few friends who are into bird watching, and I had the opportunity, back in, I think it was 2007, to travel along the Canning Stock route in Western Australia with a couple of friends who were very, very keen into watching birds and photographing and recording birds. In fact, there were three. One of my friends was actually a zoologist, had a doctorate in the area of zoology and had studied swiftlets. And there was a particular parrot that they were hoping to see and photograph on this trip. I think it was called a princess parrot. And I was amazed at their skill actually at being able to see the different birds in nature and spot them, and then be able to look at them with their binoculars. Some of the most interesting birds, of course, are very small birds, and some birds live on the ground. But my friends were certainly very keen. One of the other friends who was with me had written some books on birds and had them published, like The Birds of Bougainville and different Pacific islands. So it was. I found it really interesting afterwards. Hearing these folk talk about the different birds, and of course we saw more birds around where there was water. So if there was some sort of spring or pond, there were likely to be more birds around that area. And where I live at home here, we have a small creek and a swamp down the bottom of our property, and it attracts a lot of birds, and there are certainly some beautiful birds come in there. We sometimes get swans, black swans come in there, and occasionally too we see an eagle fly overhead, and it's interesting how the other birds will react when they see these big birds of prey flying around. And occasionally we've had an owl sit on a fence post as we've come home of a night. We've seen the owl type as tawny frogmouth species. And they're certainly inspiring birds. I could look at some of these unusual birds, and particularly owls. Recently I was reading an article about owls, because owls are a little bit different to other birds. Matter of fact, wild birds are beautiful in that they also come in and get our grapes, and I've netted our grapes in the season, but and I was able to keep out the parrots, but we'd had bushfires nearby. And there were, and we noticed that because of the bushfires that obviously burnt out the nests or natural habitat of some of the birds, we now had different birds visiting our property. And we had some bowerbirds now come, and they were so good at getting through my netting and getting to the grapes, finding little gaps somewhere. And so I bought some owls, some modern owls, and some model owls just from the hardware store, and set two of these up. And it was very interesting. That kept the parrots away. They saw the owls and, whoops, hang on, we're not going near there. But the bowerbirds dived on them, and when they saw that they could knock them over, they then got in. So I thought it was very interesting, this bird behaviour. But the interesting thing about owls was a number of different characteristics that I was reading about, and one of the facts was that one of the owls that was studied, I think it's an American species called the great grey owl, and it can, according to the research, hear the squeak of a mouse half a kilometre away. And you'll notice when you look at the owls, they have this dish-shaped face and they have these little feathers that stick on the top of their heads that look like ears. Well, those feathers apparently are not ears at all. Matter of fact, the sound mechanism is in behind feathers on their face. And that dish-shaped face that the owls have actually is like a satellite dish in a way, I suppose, but instead of focusing radiation, it focuses the sound waves into the ear area. And it's quite fascinating that the owls have lots of extra muscles in their face that enables them to adjust the shape of that disc so that it can focus the sound into their ears. And the other thing is their ears are located behind those feathers in an asymmetrical position, so that helps them to be able to pinpoint the distance very accurately as well. I thought this is an amazing design feature that has to be coordinated, and those features are in the DNA of the owl. So to locate the ears, to the DNA to have the different shaped feathers grow that actually form this dish has to be part of one DNA, but then there has to be other DNA that produces all the muscles so that the shape of the owls can actually adjust the shape of their feathers to change the focus. The other fascinating thing I was reading this article about owls is that the owls fly very silently. They have silent flight, and one of the things that contributes to that is the shape of their feathers. They on their feathers, the air turbulence that would normally be created by their wings is broken down by special little structures on the primary feathers of the leading edge of the owl's wing. Has little comb-like structures. And then the secondary feathers have jagged edges that further reduce the turbulence. And so again, this is this is a real design feature of these feathers. So there's all these different types of feathers. Now, the other thing is that the owl feathers have little sort of like Velcro groups in them, that join the feathers together. That all the little components of the feathers are held together by a system that's a bit similar to Velcro, with the little loops and barbells sort of thing. And they have owl feathers have an additional structures, and these enable these feathers again as they move to be. And the additional structure is called panula, and these are little hair-like structures secondary on these little barbules of the feather that again dampen the noise that would normally be made by those little barbells sliding. So all this sort of intricate, specialised design that all works together to make the flight of the owl virtually soundless. But again, all those structures are programmed in the DNA. And the DNA obviously then has codes the the body, the cells, to make all these different structures that further reduce the noise. Matter of fact, these structures give a velvety feel to the wings of an owl as well. But it's quite fascinating that the scientists have actually used some of the ideas that they've got from the structure of owl wings to help engineers design quieter fan blades for computers. So that was, quite interesting. The other very interesting aspect of owls is their eyes. And owls have quite large eyes. Perhaps that's what they're famous for. Their eyes are very large, and something that we see as a characteristic of owls. And so for their size, they're much, much larger than our eyes. So our eyes are relatively small for our size, but they have very large eyes. Now, our eyes are a little bit different to most birds in that most birds can roll their eyes around, and also the bird's eyes are a little bit more to the side of the head, whereas the owl eyes are in the centre, and they can't roll their eyes around. But what owls can do is they can actually move their head around through 270 degrees. So that's 3/4 of the rotation of a circle. And they can do that up and down as well as roundabout sideways. And this flexibility of their head is because they have a whole lot of extra vertebra in their neck there. Now, again, when we think of this feature, in order to allow this to work, again, the code has to be there to make all these extra vertebra that fit in with the fact that the owl eyes are in the centre of its head and they can't rotate. So I think this to me illustrates that you've got design here. To have random chance produce these sort of features that I've been talking about or that I've learned about that are in owls, again, is just overwhelming evidence of design. But it doesn't stop there. For example, even with ducks and waterfowl, for example, if we saw another documentary where when you look at the structure of their wings, as a duck comes in and lands, it's got to fly slowly and then land down. And as they've studied these ducks coming in and landing, it's amazing. So, I used to think when you look at a bird, it's got a wing, it's got feathers and it flaps it and this sort of thing. But there's just so much more to that. For example, as the ducks come in to land, they actually adjust the shape of the feathers on the tips of their wing, and they spread them out. The feathers actually spread apart. And then just forward of on the front edge of the wing and just in a little bit from the tips of the wing are a separate set of muscles operating a separate set of little feathers, like a little sort of finger of feathers. And these feathers, again, just as the duck is coming down, they open out, and this stops the duck as it's lowering its speed from stalling and dropping hard onto the water, for example. It allows it to actually just come down and land very softly by changing the aerodynamics of the airfoil at that particular time. Now, this is the part of the landing mechanism, but when you think about this, you've got to have design for all these muscles that operate all these different aspects of the wing. So it's not just the up and down movement of the wing. There's all these muscles that control the movement of the different feathers that change the aerodynamics of the wing. so that the bird can fly under all sorts of different conditions and land and take off. Matter of fact, there are hundreds of muscles in the wings, of all different types of muscles. So what I'm saying is there's hundreds of different types of muscles in the wings of birds. And when we look at their structure, all those muscles, to form those muscles, which have unique design, unique structures, where they're attached to on the bones, the way they're arranged, the nerves that control them, are all programmed by the genetic code. And to me, this is overwhelming evidence of an amazing creator engineers. Evolutionists have to believe that random, blind mutations could change a code so that this code could then produce all these coordinated muscles that actually work and coordinate and enable flight. You know, when you think about flight, we've had some pretty clever scientists in the past. You know, if we move on from, Sir Francis Bacon founding the Royal Society and the developer of mathematics and calculus, and Newton and the laws of motion, the laws of physics and light and sound. And then moving on, we got Maxwell's equations and understanding energy, electromagnetic fields and so forth. But it wasn't until the early 1900s that man was able to design a machine, and he needed an engine that enabled him to fly. I suppose you could say, well, we did have hot air balloons prior to that. But in terms of flying, there was an enormous amount of engineering, trying to go in, studying birds, trying to get man to fly. And of course, now we've got these little parachute things and people can hang an engine on them and fly around. We've got hang gliders and different things like that too now. With a lot of technology, a lot of advanced science, and a lot of our understanding of how to fly, how to design planes. Some of the different, commercial jets, at the end of their wings are turned up. Again, this is all based on studying the design of birds and how birds fly and understanding how birds fly and studying the physics and the flow and Bernoulli's equations and all these sort of things that have been developed. And as we understand airflow models and lift and so forth. We've got teams and teams of engineers, aeronautics department, physicists, engineers and so forth, working together to design, aircraft that can fly. And yet birds totally outperform aircraft. And I guess we could say, well, we've got, super fast jet engines now can fly faster than birds. But in terms of manoeuvrability, birds are absolutely amazing. And we're taught in schools that blind chance mutations produced these amazing structures. And to me, if the biologists understood, hang on, you've got to have blind mutations change a code that are made up of four chemical bases, four chemical types of molecules that we attribute the name A, C, T and G to, and this code from combinations of these can be read by a code reading machine and produce the proteins that produce the structures that produce these amazing features that are all coordinated and work. Another one that I saw recently was in the hummingbirds, and hummingbirds are amazing with their flight. And I was fascinated to read that their heart, the little hummingbird heart, beats at 1,250 beats per minute. Just imagine that, and the valving and the structure in that little heart that can beat so fast. And of course their wings can beat at tremendous speeds as well. And they can hover, they can move up, down, backwards, sideways. these amazing little birds that took engineers quite a bit of study to build the equivalent that could do some of the actions of a hummingbird in terms of a mechanical model. And again, the hummingbird needs a lot of fuel to operate, to provide the energy, to beat those wings at the high speeds that it beats, and in all different directions. It can rotate its wings in all different directions. And again, the muscles that enable it to do that, the nerves that control those muscles, are all encoded for in the genetic code. And one of the things, of course, that scientists saw, hummingbirds eat the nectar of them, and they thought, well, as it sticks its tongue in, its tongue is like a straw and sucks the nectar up. But, of course, nectar is quite viscous, and to get enough nectar that way actually wouldn't work real well. And it's been discovered, and I thought this is really, really amazing. Let me try and describe it to you this way. I don't know whether you've seen, sometimes you might get a document sent to you, and it might have, say, some plastic covers or cardboard covers on and at the end it's held together by a plastic strip that is made up of a lot of little curly bits, and you can open out with your fingers, you could open out those little curly bits and lift out the pages. So at the left side of the page there'd be a whole lot of little rectangular holes, maybe 20 little rectangular holes, and for say an A4 size page, and that's where these little plastic tabs fit through and they curve over. Now, the reason why I describe that is what they've found is on a hummingbird's tongue, as it sticks its tongue out of the beak to get the nectar, there are actually two of those little plastic coils, and those coils are made up of a whole lot of little independent tabs that, as it sticks its tongue into the nectar, each of those little tabs, there might be 20 or so tabs on the side of its tongue or more, open out. The nectar, of course, flows in. Then the little tabs close and encapsulate that nectar. So it's sort of like these little mini scoops that scoop it up along into this very long tongue on either side of this very long tongue, and then take it back in to the bird's mouth. So it's not a suck-up action. It's these two tubes, and then the sides of these tubes open out, but not in one long piece, but in a whole lot of little cups that can scoop up the nectar. And again, it's a brilliant design, absolutely brilliant design to cope with the viscosity and so forth of that particular nectar and food that the bird needs. Enables it to get large quantities in one go in a very short time, just in, scoop, out. Doesn't have to suck it up. And again, that amazing feature, right, and all the components to it, is in the DNA code. And, when I look at the birds, and there are so many other things that could talk about in terms of the design of birds. You know what the evolutionary model is? That dinosaurs evolved into birds, right? And that some dinosaurs developed some feathers, and their scales on the dinosaurs sort of evolved and became feathers, and these feathers, eventually became enough and the dinosaur could, flap its arms and had all these scales that had become feathers, and it could fly. And other dinosaurs found, they could fly because they had to jump from tree to tree to catch insects or little animals, or other ones, say, developed these feathers and in order to swing them around to catch insects or something like that. And have all these crazy ideas, and this is the scenario that we're fed, that dinosaurs evolved into birds. And yet they're totally different. You know, the birds have hollow bones so that they're light. The birds have flow through lungs so that they're can breathe and get all that oxygen for the amount of energy they earn. So many things are different to dinosaurs, and these all require different code, totally different code. And one of the very subtle features that perhaps people don't think about is it's amazing in that when birds fly, all right, they have quite large, what we equivalent to human pectoral muscles, I suppose, on their chests that operate out, that pull those wings down against the air. But they also need very strong muscles to pull the wings back up. But in a bird, those muscles aren't on top. Those muscles are also underneath so that the bird has ballast and stability in flight. And those muscles instead operate over a little pulley system so that they're pulling from the top. In other words, the muscles that pull the top of the wing up run over like a little bone pulley system so to the muscle that is down underneath. And again, this is unique, amazing design. And it has to be coordinated. You've got to have the bone structure for the pulley. You've got to have now the muscle form in a way that it forms over the top of the pulley, and so even though it attaches to the top of the wing, it attaches over so that it goes over this pulley and attaches underneath to the underneath part of the bird, and hence can be a large muscle rather than have a large bulky muscle on top of the bird. These amazing features again are all evidence of a design. And the Bible tells us that designer was God. That's the God that Christians worship. That's the creator God that the Bible talks about. That's the real God who answers prayer. The God that created those birds, that created the universe, that created the plants. That's the God that says in the Bible he wants to have a relationship with us. That's the God who wants us to pray to him, to come to him and accept him as our loving Heavenly Father, a Father who wants to care for us and provide for us and bless us. And that's why he came to earth as Jesus Christ, our Saviour, to demonstrate what he was like, and so that we would come to know him in a very, very personal way. And, of course, the Bible is the account of those people who actually met God. I'd encourage you to read the Bible, especially the New Testament. The God that designed amazing birds is an amazing God. You've been listening to Faith and Science. Remember, you can hear these programs again by just go on your search engine and enter 3ABN Australia, or one word, .org.au, and click on the listen button. I'm Dr. John Ashton. Have a great day.
You've been listening to a production of 3ABN Australia Radio.